to another Celebrity by Design. My name's Damien. I'm founder and director of Evolutionary Relating, and I'm here with Fabrice, founder and director of Your Genetic Matrix.
Yep.
Yep. And this is something that we love to get together every now and then and just jam out about human design. Fabrice was my mentor as I decided when I decided to go much deeper into design work, and it's really fun to be able to like get in here and just continue to geek out and continue to like understand and learn all the nuances and intricacies of this like pretty profound system. You know, this system that like I find consistently demonstrates validity in my experience from every reading that I've done, from people that I just look at, from friends. So we've been looking at celebrity profiles to dive in and demonstrate what, you know, human design analysis can do, and just to continue to jam out and just to geek out on people that lots of us know. So um, welcome, Fabrice, and we're going to dive into mental projectors. A couple of mental projectors today. Yeah.
Yeah, this one is gonna be a bit different. Also unexpected. It's just we kind of stumbled upon those charts and decided to go there. First of all, we wanted to look at a woman today for a change. And so the first mental projector that we'll be looking at is Serena Williams, arguably the greatest, and the numbers show for it. Greatest female tennis player of all time. She's quite well known and famous around the world. And looking at her chart and the story of conditioning through the open centers. And then we'll be looking at another very similar profile with a very similar story, also with the father's conditioning since childhood of Khabib Nurmagomedov, also arguably the greatest this time UFC or MMA fighter of all time. So both of them being at the absolute top level in terms of an athletic sports career, requiring huge amounts of vitality, dedication, discipline, staying power, yet being mental projectors with zero energy centers. And when we dig into their stories, you'll understand that they have a lot of similarities. And so, we're going to have a little bit of a semi-improvised, look at the charts and seeing what comes out through the conversation.
Cool. Let's dive
I'll
in.
start. Yep, I'll start sharing the chart. So let's start with Serena, because we wanted to have a woman as the main central piece here for this one. As you can see, mental projector with ajna connected to the throat. She's a 6'3", and so you can see everything else fully open. All the motors, energy centers fully open. The head, undefined, sorry, and the head fully open. So giving room for a lot of conditioning. And her story is interesting. Her and her sister Venus, since they're very young kids, there's actually a movie that came out recently. If you want to go watch it, it's a good movie. It's called King Richard. Will Smith plays the father, and he actually got the Oscar for it. It's funny because we did a movie on Will Smith when the drama with the slap happened. We did a reading on his chart. You can find it on the YouTube channel. And so now he's actually
Mhm.
the slap happened during the Oscar ceremony for this movie. So it's an interesting connection.
Uh,
Um,
Now I want to
uh,
watch the movie.
yeah, it's actually a good movie, and you can see how, like, from the beginning, so they came from a very, very poor neighborhood, poor background, uh Black American family, and at the time, like, no Black kids or Black people were really playing tennis, and especially not from those poor neighborhoods. And the father just insisted on training them, making them better and better and better, and it was really, like, father's plan all along to make it happen. The older sister Venus went on to become a world champion, and then the younger sister Serena went on to not only become a world champion, but went on to become the greatest of all time with the biggest amounts of victories um, and tournaments won and so on and so on, and by far. So there's no discussion there. So we can first,
Mm.
before we move on to the other chart, we can have a look, at the different aspects of her profile. Um, Before I start commenting, I'm curious, like when you look at it, Damien, like what's the first thing that kind of strikes you if knowing a little bit about her life and maybe even her sports career?
Yeah, there's I don't know very much about Serena Williams, to be honest. So I'm like a little bit more of a backseat on this particular episode. I'm going to watch the movie and find out a bit more. But hearing the story that you talk about and the father and everything, what I find myself really fascinated is about her father's design, because
Mm.
that I think would probably have a significant impact. And I would imagine, if I was to guess, there's probably a defined head or defined G center as part of that.
And
That's
probably
something
define
that
ego.
probably a defined ego too. That's kind of like something that tickles me, particularly the defined head. Like I see that really open head,
Mm.
and the and there's the open solar plexus too, and um, these completely open centers are like the most sensitive to conditioning. They also seem to be, once we understand how to not be conditioned, they actually seem really easy. When I decondition my solar plexus, which is completely open as well, it's actually really easy to maintain it open, to maintain
Mm.
it not being impacted. But until I learned that, I was completely under the effect of my solar plexus. It was completely conditioned for most of my life. And I imagine that open head is probably something there. That's the kind of that's what tickles me. This open head of um, almost like a place where, you know, something that like I need to be something, like might come in. There's like that kind of like conditioned mental aspect. Um, yeah, that's just something that really tickles me. And then also the 35.5 vocation as well is very interesting to me. That kind of stands out. I'm often drawn to when we're talking about celebrities and we're talking about people who we're looking really at their livelihood. We're looking
Mm.
at what they're doing for a living, and so I'm often really drawn to that unconscious Mars, which is in the gene keys that's called the vocation sphere, and it's often representative to what our major kind of like vocational path is oriented around. So that 35 is like that boundless hunger to boundlessness to adventure, and so, with the conditioning and that kind of hunger has the potential to, like get something in, this idea of like, I get something in my head and I'm just going to be relentless with it. That's kind of what piques my
Mm.
first thoughts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it would be great to have the father's chart. I doubt we would have his exact time of birth and so on. But it's interesting to look at her activation sequence or incarnation cross in human design, especially these two. And actually, I can just show the gene key so it's more clear.
I'm gonna look up the keynote of reincarnation cross too.
The life's work of the 46, and the 46 being the gate of the love of the body. Yeah, and you can see she has the 46 twice, both in black and in red, conscious and unconscious. So the 46 is a very strong gate in her profile, and she has it. You can see she has it both actually in her life's work and in her culture. Yeah, so much of her prosperity comes through the 46, which is again the love of the body and connecting to the needs of the body. And so I can imagine that, being in the world of sports and all the time using your body would be easily connecting to that. And then her purpose is the 58, and the 58 is the gate of vitality.
Mm.
Yeah, same thing, like having that as your purpose, like it means like deeply anchored in your body, you have this gift of vitality. And so it's interesting, like, where does she get her vitality from? Well, she has it, she has it. Fair enough, it's in an undefined center and there's no connection and she doesn't have the full channel and so on, but nonetheless, like there is those
Which
gifts,
also
which
means
is,
it can be amplified.
yeah, Exactly. It could be, taken in from the outside, amplified, and filtered through those gifts of, the 46 and the 58. And so we do find some clues as to, why it might be this way in her case.
Here's the keynotes of her incarnation cross, the left angle cross of healing two. People who spontaneously heal or can be healed through contact with forces of impersonal universal love, a rare and joyous gift that comes alive through a focused, committed connection with the other. And the other maybe being her vocation of sports, her vocation of tennis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another one which is interesting is the only channel that she has, the 1156, where there is a certain it's like the channel of entertainment in a way, and so the ability also to deliver. And she was quite the entertaining player as well, and so I can see how that would, like a lot of performers, or it's good whether you're a writer, an actor, or even stand-up comedians and so on. Like this channel can be very helpful, and performers of all kind, included even in sports. She was always quite captivating for those watching her.
The thing that's like really interesting to me around like mental projector, and we're going to look at Khabib, and you pronounced his last name so beautifully, I'm not even going to try. That and we've got these two examples of mental projectors who like playing extremely vigorous levels of sport, like and excessive amounts of physical training, like ridiculous, and no consistent emotion, like energy to put behind that. So what stands out for me, like there's one question and then there's one hypothesis. So the one question is, where is the energy coming from? And then the hypothesis is, or the feeling that I get around the projector in general, but particularly the mental projector, projectors to me, and you can verify this for me as well, projectors have that, they have this penetrating or focused aura that seems to go into understanding the intricacies of how things work. And it doesn't necessarily like that aura can go into people. Penetrators can be kind of great therapists or coaches, and they can penetrate really deeply and understand people, but they also seem to be systems focused. Projectors can go in and understand how distinct systems work. They can go in and work in IT or something, and they'll go in and understand very complex systemic relationships of how things work. And I imagine the same kind of thing can be applied to training. A training is a system. If you understand, like often we think about, when we're operating at a non-professional, like non-monetary level of sports, it's just kind of like talent, talent and grit gets you there. But actually, when you go up to professional levels, you now start dealing with miniature of percentages of change. It's like if you have a certain angle of how you hold your wrist when you hit the racket, you'll have a more efficient kind of relationship between the ball. You'll get more speed. You'll have more predictability where it lands. It's consistent, and you make these consistent changes, and you get increments of advantage. I remember reading the opening chapter of this book, Atomic Habits, and there was a coach who took I think it was the English bicycling team, and he started making like the tiniest adjustments, like the truck they carried the bikes in and how they wiped the dust off the bikes, and like all of these tiny little things. And over 5 years, the team, which was performing very poorly, started to perform at like one of the top levels. Yeah. And so there's this consistent increase of efficiency. And I make up that this mental projector has the ability to see at the level of detail what minute things can be adjusted or changed to make maximum effect. So I make up that's part of what's actually happening here. And then there's the second part is like, where is the energy? So we've got the efficiency, but we also need the energy, right?
Yeah, well, this makes me want to jump to Khabib's chart. I mean, here I was just speaking before on the few things that give me some keys as to where is her energy coming from, and especially had this 58 of purpose, and again, Gene Keys is a system that stands on its own, just like human design can as well. And so if we forgot about human design and we're just looking at her gene keys chart, forgetting that she's a mental predictor, like, oh, you know, purpose of vitality and life's work of, the love of the body and the gifts of the body and culture, same 46 again, like,
Mm.
oh, and she's a role model of that on top of it, like,
And the
and
vocation of boundlessness, which is another energy.
yeah, and this energy of hunger that could very much play into competition as well. And line three, what's best for her body is movement. Like, if we stick
Mm.
to the gene keys, like, oh yeah, of course, sure, like, she was supposed to be a vital, competitive, whatever, but then we look at the human design, it's like, oh, mental projector. Okay, where is she getting the energy from in terms
And
of the
and
centers?
and there's one more thing that that I sit on is it's like in human design, it's like if we don't have a defined center, it doesn't mean we don't have the attributes or qualities of that center. It just means that they're not consistent.
Yeah.
There's not a consistent relationship to energy. And we don't know what these people's training patterns is like. Maybe they, I have one friend who is a splenic projector, the spleen to the ego. That's it, ego spleen. And he works in ropes access and he goes out to work and he works for like long, 2 weeks of like, I think they're like 20 hours, 16-hour days, like just insane amounts of hours. Like he used to go out and work on boats, and doing rigging for boats and like cleaning boats and everything. And since he's been doing like rock demolitions and clearing roads and stuff like ridiculous amounts of energy. And I was like, when I looked up his chart, I'm like, I'm fascinated. I'm like, where do you get the energy? And I'm like, do you crash? And he's like, yeah, he works really hard for this period of time. And then when he comes home, he literally is immobile for several days, like completely immobile for several days. And then he gets up and goes again, And so there's this possibility that is still running on, and as you were speaking before when we're offline, the conditioning of the team that you're playing with. So we're amplifying lots of energy,
Mhm.
and then maybe they're like, come home from training camp and like, I'm not moving for a week.
Well, it makes me want to jump to Khabib's chart and share a bit about his story.
Yeah.
Um, Very similar story in a way. So he was born in Dagestan. Dagestan is a region of Russia, which is like far in the mountains, mostly Muslim dominated, and they're like living in very, very harsh conditions, most of them very poor as well. Um, and his father had a dream. His father had a plan, and it was for his son to become the best in the world. First, it was in sambo, which is a kind of mix of wrestling and judo and jiu-jitsu and kind of all put together, and that went on to become his specialty. And then on to MMA, mixed martial arts, and he became, multiple times champion in the UFC, and he went on to finish his career with a 29-0 record. He was never ever defeated. I believe in his whole career in the UFC, he lost one round. So, most fights are anywhere between 3 to 5 rounds. Uh, he lost one round, I think, in his entire career. So it was just insane domination from beginning to finish in all of his fights. And what was excellent, he was never the best striker, but he was good at avoiding punches, and then he was just the best at grabbing people and controlling them on the ground and submitting them over and over and over and over again. He was really like a bear, just mauling people, and there was nothing that they could do. Even the best in the world, they just couldn't do anything against him. It was just never really competitive.
I make up that he probably, I hear that, like he was able to avoid punches. And then I hear that like be able to dominate on the ground. I imagine he probably had a very high level of technical proficiency.
Yeah.
And I make up that that's again that kind of like projector understanding of the systems and the level of efficiency. I can read, I make up there's like a sense of like being able to read the other
And
person,
mind
read the
you,
other
like,
opponent.
both of them six line also, like Serena six line personality,
Yeah.
he is a six line personality.
Yeah.
Both of them six line mental projectors, so it's that's already very interesting.
Yeah.
And coming back to the question of energy, I mean, he said for him, like, training life was like being in jail. He
Yeah.
always says that so another interesting fact, when his father died, he had one more fight and then he retired. He stopped fighting the moment that his father was gone. So the biggest conditioning of his life, father's dream, father's plan, it was all the time like. And then now Khabib is a trainer and he's very happy being a trainer, and he's actually a very good trainer. I believe so far still undefeated as a trainer even. So meaning like all the fighters, fighting under his wing are all winning, and so uh he might become an even better trainer than he was a fighter. And being a mental projector, it fits way better actually to be a trainer. And so he completely mastered the system of sambo, of wrestling, of taking people to the ground and controlling them with perfect technique. Of course, everyone said like he's very, very strong. Not so much a very hard puncher, but when it came to, isometric strength and controlling people and strangling them and so on, they all said that he's very, very strong. So of course there is that part, but his technique, like the
Mm-hmm.
people like explaining what it was like to share the cage with him, it's like they never felt controlled in such a way. Like he was like his ability to the way he would put his weight in a certain way and do a specific technique, and like it was just impossible
Yeah.
to fight against. And so it's really like achieving this level of extreme mastery over time. But again, the moment father was gone, he lost his drive and he became a trainer. He put on also a lot of weight. He started eating way more. Like he just lost the disciplined life of, that he had before. And he's still training himself as well. Like it's not like he completely stopped. But coming back to the question of the energy and where the fuck do you get it from? Um, you don't get to catch much of a break when you're a fighter because you have those 8 week long training camps where you're training twice a day, every single day. Maybe you get to have one day off. I don't know. But it's nonstop grueling training with like technical
Mm.
training, conditioning, strength, sparring, like
Mm.
everything you have to train individually and then together. But the thing is, you're constantly with the whole team, especially in his case, all those guys from Dagestan, because now the UFC is full of them because they're really good at what they do. It's also another piece to add is genetics. Like all those guys coming from that area of the world are complete freaks and excellent athletes and excellent in what they do. Um, but nonetheless, you're constantly, not only you have the conditioning from father, but you have the whole team with you, anywhere between 10 to 50 guys in the room at any given time. And so he's all the time taking in, all the energy from his open centers. In his case, completely open sacral.
Yeah.
Like it's the one center that he has completely open. I would imagine his father had a defined G, potentially defined ego, also pressing there. I can imagine also having, maybe a defined root pressing on there as well. Interesting for him. He has the 58 as well that repeats quite a few times. Um, what else can we see here? Maybe some things in common. Really, the 58 that they have in common, but that's about it. Another thing that's interesting about 6'2s, and I've seen this repeatedly around me and even in other celebrities that I know, when I find out that they're projectors, and I'm like, where do you get like all of them have one thing? So they're all projectors, they're all super fit, and they all train a lot, like consistently training pretty much every day. I have two friends as an
Mm.
example, and then I have someone else as well in there, and they're all 6'2s projectors. And it's interesting because when we think of the second line, well, the second line is the line of natural talent, So we have, and if the second line is in your design, so if you're a 6'2 or a 5'2, it's the gifted body, And so I've
Mm.
noticed like now in 3 or 4 different projectors having a second line body where they actually have an amazing amount of vitality. They look really good. Like they have a really beautiful, like shaped body. They're all ripped as fuck. They all train also very hard. Whether it's, weightlifting, CrossFit, jiu-jitsu, boxing, or all of it together. and training pretty much daily and not burning out while doing that. So it's also an interesting thing to note about this second line body. It's a pattern that I've seen repeated over time.
Yeah, yeah. I've definitely noticed that anyone who has a second line in their activation sequence in their profile usually has a very determined relationship to their body. It's like a very natural and intuitive and consistent relationship to body. Body's very
Mhm.
important, and definitely in that unconscious part as well. Um, yeah, and I'm just like, I just get this sense, even looking at the profile of like a lot of mental toughness, you know, a lot of mental toughness, a lot of mental toughness and understanding, like probably a very easy understanding of the opponent, like an easy ability to
Yeah.
read the opponent and understand what this opponent is up to and what they're going to do and where their weak points are without a lot of effort. It's probably very natural to just understand, and a lot of technical proficiency combined with good genetics, father's conditioning, and then the amplification of being in the training camp. Like I've spent small amounts. I remember I've done small amounts of training camps in Muay Thai camps when I lived in Thailand, and it's like it sucks.
Hmm.
And I'm a manifestor. I don't have consistent energy, but being in the training camp means like you have to train. Like it's like you can't avoid it. And I just like literally I'd train. We'd do 3 hours in the morning. I'd go home and I'd sleep, lie in bed, and kind of like and then like the alarm would go off and pull myself to go back for the 3 hours in the afternoon. That was all. We're only doing 6 hours,
Yeah.
but you're in it. You're in the conditions where you kind of have to show up. You kind of can't
Mhm.
not. So you're held by that team environment and the coach and the trainer. So that's obviously playing a feature. It's not like you can go, "Oh, I don't feel like it today." When you're in a training camp, you don't get that luxury.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it kind of makes sense to me. It makes sense a lot to
Yeah.
me. That line
There's
too.
two more things that are interesting here. The sphere of attraction here, the design moon, which is his only gate in the ego, and which is the gate of will. So
Yep.
the gate of willpower and the ability to push through. And I can imagine if
Resolve.
the ego, yeah, is under, uh, you know, conditioning from the outside, how it would be channeled through this one specifically. And then another interesting one, which might not always be obvious, but I have other examples in mind of, especially one person in particular who's has been an extremely dedicated yogi for the last 20 years or so, with like never missing his daily practice. And I'm talking hours every day, anywhere between 2 to 6 hours of practice every single day. And pretty intense, like Kundalini practices. Like he's a projector, he's a 4-6 projector. Intense Kundalini practices and meditation every day. It takes a lot of energy, but yet he has showed up consistently. And the one thing he has very prominent in his profile, which is the same for Khabib as well, is having the 15 here in his radiance. So the radiance is connected to your aura and energy and overall health of the body. And the 15 is the love of the mundane, the love of the human life, which
Mm.
comes with its endless, you know, repetitions. And waking up, and the 15 is half of the channel of rhythm. The fifth gate in the sacral is giving this rhythmic pulse of the sacral. And so this channel is all about daily routines and rhythms, and really, like, in a way, embracing the mundane and embracing those rhythms of nature also. And in this case, I can imagine how having this in this rate having that in his this radiance, maybe he had an easier time kind of showing up for the same thing every day,
Mm.
which is also like what I found in this other person's profile, the yogi that I mentioned, where I was wondering, like, where does he get it from? And then I saw that there and was like, oh, okay, like there is
Mm.
there is something that can help you to stick with the thing every day and to find love in doing that thing.
And I also imagine coupled with the 10.2 and the purpose as well, which is, naturalness. The 10 is about naturalness and the line 2 is about naturalness. So there's this like innate beingness or naturalness across the board in that level of purpose as well. So there's that body-based
Yeah.
sense of naturalness. The 10 is also a body
Yeah, and
orientation.
to confirm what you were saying about his mental abilities, it's absolutely true. And he's become one of the most like respected minds in the game now. You know, he's commenting on a lot of things and he's predicting also a lot of things, and often being very much right because he sees, you know,
Yeah.
and you can see that he speaks with this absolute certainty. It's like, I know, like, you know, and he has, you can see also the 17 through the Ajna and the 11, and like there's a lot going on here, you know, and he's just speaking with so much certainty, which sometimes is triggering people, but he turns out to be right. And
Mm.
so, you know, you can, it's really like you were saying, this ability to see, you know, the games of the other and to have this very like clear understanding of the game, which, you know, has served him well until now.
Mm.
We could go into so many details in terms of the conditioning of all of the centers and all of that. But first of all, we don't have the charts of the fathers and questions for both of them. And then also, we recently did a workshop on all the conditioning of all of the centers, and the recording is now available. So if you will want to have a look at that, there's going to be a link just below the video. It's super affordable. It's a 3-hour workshop where we're going through all the 9 centers and the conditioning of the 9 centers, and it's called Boundaries by Design. You know, the need for boundaries when it comes to the open centers, and this notion of containment as well for the defined centers. So we had over 80 people already who signed up, and yeah, it's still very much available.
Yeah, it was a great workshop as well. And the centers, it's almost like sometimes we'll bypass the centers to jump to like looking at the gates and looking at the lines and looking at the channels and being all excited about these. And I remember when I was learning with you, you know, right, you know, a couple of years ago now, and you were telling me the centers are like really important. And I was like, no, come on, let's get to circuitry and gate, you know, channels and everything. That's more interesting. And having gone back and spent more time contemplating and being with the centers, seeing how absolutely profound it is to understand the nature of conditioning and the nature of the ways that we are being impacted and we are impacting each other, you know. And so that's one of these main features on both of these designs. Maybe we go back to Serena as well. Should we kind
Yeah,
of finish
sure.
on her as well? Both of these designs, they have a lot of openness in them, and that openness gives rise to a lot of conditioning, a lot of ways of like the conditioning kind of functions in 2 ways. When we're unhealthy in those, when we're unconscious in those open centers, we're just taking on everyone else's stuff without even knowing about it. But as we become conscious, you know, and conscious may not necessarily have anything to do with human design. It may just be we've done personal development work or we've been in the right conditions or whatever. Those become ways in which we can amplify others. They become ways in which we can understand others, we can sample others. And so this idea of the mental projector being able to see very deeply into others, it's actually through a lot of these undefined centers that they can see others. They're actually receiving and sampling other people's experiences through all of these undefined areas. So that gives them quite a significant advantage on being able to perceive what other people's motivations, what other people's energies, where they're coming from, where they're moving from, you know, whether they're consciously doing that or they're unconsciously reacting and being conditioned by that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a fascinating topic, and I've found also, you know, in the mental projectors, other projectors or mental projectors who were also at the top of their game. So it's interesting, and it opens also a bigger topic, which is, you know, and I don't think we have a definite answer, but we live in a world which is hyper competitive, and
Mm-hmm.
where it's not so much about being the happiest, but it's about being the best. And sometimes taking in a huge amount of conditioning, amplifying that conditioning, might make you the best in that thing. And so it's interesting that, but now the question is, were they happy doing that thing? You know, and from Serena, I don't know much, but from Khabib, I know that, you know, he said like the fighting life was pretty miserable. It's like you're in jail. You know, you're in jail training all the time, and he says he's much happier since he stopped and since he's just a trainer. You know, he really loves life a lot more, and now he's doing other businesses. Like he's living his life and building it as he wants. You know, so as sad as he was when his father passed away, he got this huge amount of freedom from that conditioning and from that plan, you know, from that dream, and just started living his own life. And so sometimes there is a choice between greatness, or what our society deems as greatness, and this thing of
Mm.
competition and being the best, and happiness. And again, there's no right or, like, do maybe it's amazing the fact that he was so conditioned and became the best. Maybe the world is a better place because of him and because of her. And surely the tennis world is better off thanks to Serena Williams and her father, and the sister as well. But then again, on a personal level, what has been the personal individual sacrifice, to get there?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It'd be very interesting to see. Is she still playing, or is she retired?
She's not officially retired yet, but she's clearly like on the way down. Like she's not performing the way she used to. She's now like, she's pretty, compared to most tennis players, she's overweight. She's always been very powerful, and technical. She's the hardest hitter out there in when it comes to women. Um, but she's slower. I can tell that she has a hard time catching certain balls and so on. And so now she's not, she's getting old compared to other players out there as well. So I can tell that she's having a hard time, and I don't think she'll be lasting much longer.
Yeah, I mean, I know what it's like to be in my early 40s now. I definitely wouldn't be able to keep up with people in their 20s.
Yeah,
Not
exactly.
easily. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. Cool. Very interesting. Mental projectors. Yeah.
Yeah, let us know in the comments below who you'd like to see next. If you have, we keep note of all those things, and sometimes we just go with our own minds and what we're interested in, but we still keep notes of what you're asking for. Especially if we start running out of inspiration, we're gonna start looking through that long list of potential celebrities that you guys have been asking for through Facebook and YouTube. Um, yeah, and I don't know which one we're gonna do next, but we'll surely keep on doing the series because it's always very interesting to look at those charts.
It's definitely good fun. Thanks, Fabrice.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.